Are you a
10, 9, 8.
Okay, so we're gonna be
Welcome to Gather Geeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. This episode is a Gather Geeks special sponsor edition. Here's your host, BizBash chairman and founder, David Adler.
On this special edition of Gather Geeks, we're focusing on the new strategies for events and meetings. Our co-host is Cathy Novelli, the SVP of Marketing and Communications for the event platform Hubspot. Our other guests include Robert Thompson, the VP of Sales for AV Canada, Sara, the VP of Events at Rakuten Americas, and Dahlia Gazzar, one of our industry's foremost experts on technology and event strategies, who is in her own firm. In this episode, planners and vendors take off the gloves to frankly discuss the new purposes for events and how, at this moment, it is so stressful. Just when we thought everything was going to be better, the rug was pulled out from under our industry. Despite the moment, the conversation goes to how to merge content, contact, community, intimacy, and activism from all participants. So let's take a listen. Cathy, welcome to Gather Geeks as our co-host.
Thank you, David. I'm so excited to be here. I think this topic and everything we're going to dive into from three different perspectives is super excited.
We have an international crowd here today, but we'll get into that later. Why don't you first tell us a little bit about Hubspot and what it is and how it's burst onto the scene and taken so much sort of energy into the field where people are now using it for their events and their meetings.
Yeah, it's nuts. I started with Hubspot April of this year, but 5 years before the pandemic, they had already been in the event space, perfecting the science of event engagement. But obviously at that time, that meant in-person events. And they were really working to perfect the matchmaking and the other levels of engagement outside of sessions with various events.
You took a job that is a little bit different than being an event organizer. You have a grand experience in this world. What about it that said, aha, there's something going on here?
I had put on many events. So coming into it as an event organizer, what really helped them separate themselves from the rest of the industry to me was that a whole, half of their company is focused on the support elements, meaning they don't just give you an event platform and they're like, there you go, good luck. And I think everyone needed full service customer success teams. And that's what Hubspot very uniquely has in this space. Because I know when I was leading events last year and we had more and more virtual events, I would have died for a live customer success team to be there with me so that I wasn't, I'm trying to watch my language, but so that I wasn't freaking out every 2 minutes as I was. I knew that they had something. I knew that they weren't differentiating themselves as much as they could in that area. So it was really exciting to be able to come and help build the category as much as their brand.
That's fantastic. Let's go around the horn and we'll find out who everyone else is and where you're calling from to. Sara, why don't you give us a little bit about where you stand in the event industry and your company? I've heard a lot about it from you, and I was very excited to hear your strategies and how you're shifting your strategies a little bit. So you can touch on the high-level version of that, but not too long so we can get everybody a chance, and then we'll dig in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be chatting with everybody. First, I live in McLean, Virginia. So I'm in the Virginia area, and I moved here in January of this year, so the middle of the pandemic. And then my world is corporate events. So I have been doing corporate events my entire career, whether it was for a nonprofit organization or now for Rakuten, which is a very large e-commerce organization. They do a million different things. I won't get into the details, but if you shop online, definitely check out Rakuten.com for some cash back. And prior to COVID, we were running really large in-person conferences. That was our focus, and cocktail events and dinners and really primarily face-to-face events. Of course, now that has pivoted, which I'm sure we'll talk about today, into virtual offerings, anything from webinars to cooking events and entertainment events.
But you focus on the B2B area or consumer area or all areas?
B2B.
And so who are the attendees at your face-to-face events?
So it depends on which events we're putting on, but primarily it's our clients. So for Rakuten Advertising, it's a digital marketing arm of Rakuten. We have our affiliate marketing. So we have our clients or advertisers, such as the larger brands, pretty much anyone that has a shopping cart on their website, you can say is an advertiser. And then the publishers. So like a Rakuten.com, where they're advertising those shopping sites. And we have our advertisers and our publishers come together for networking. And then for Rakuten.com, again, our advertisers that are on the site.
Why don't we let's go to our international participant, Robert Thompson.
Hello.
Tell us a little bit about your world and what you're up to.
Yeah, so my world is similar to Sarah's, just from a different point of view. I'm from AV Canada / AV America, and we're sort of international company that way in terms of the America. But we generally do events. We were doing live events right up till March with hybrid components to them at times, webcasting out and doing all that kind of cool thing, having Zoom come into the meetings, Skype, all those types of things that have been happening for the last 10, 15 years. But then in March of last year, everything changed to a fully virtual world. So of course we had planners like Sara and Cathy that completely freaked out. So our job was to hold their hands and help them through the process. And at the same time, we were teaching ourselves how to manage the virtual world, because we could always do the different sort of, as I said, the Skypes into the meetings or the Zooms into the meetings or video conferencing. We could always do that, but now fully virtual. And now we had to figure out platforms, right? Where is that? We're going to produce these events. Where do they land? Where are they going to go? And so we had to quickly convert to that. So my world over the last year and a half has been basically training myself and training my staff and training the whole company to this whole new way of thinking. And
I feel the old way of thinking all of a sudden comes to mind is the AOL, when you used to start up the AOL and it said, and it made all this noise. Yeah. Like before COVID, that's what I feel like we were in. And now we're in a completely brave new world. And speaking of brave new worlds, Dahlia, one of my old friends and fellow travelers in this path, is a wealth of knowledge. And I can't wait to hear your perspective, because you talk to a gazillion people probably every day.
I do. So I'm Dahlia, for those that don't know me. Dahlia Plus Agency was created to be that source of expertise or experience, or right now my world is about therapy. And I am talking people off ledges, talking people that are ugly crying in the bathroom because they have a shit show slow-mo. That's my new hashtag, where everything is just moving really slow and it's a train wreck and you can't stop it. But basically our team comes in where we are able to help people think strategy first, technology last, but also in regards to it's not cookie cutter anymore. So when we talk about like new norm, when we talk about what kind of event you are designing, my pet peeve, and Sara actually heard me this morning, where the H word is the new P word. And we shouldn't be using that terminology. It gives a tunnel vision to our stakeholders and to ourselves psychologically. And it actually prevents us from doing what we kick ass at. As event professionals, we kick ass at being creative, not about innovative technology, but innovatively how we use technology, as well as strategy first. So there's a lot of firsts for people for the last 2 years. What they don't understand is hybrid, blended, virtual, in-person. We've been doing formats of that for ages. We just need to get better at it. So instead of it being on the bottom of a to-do list or on a nice fuchsia post-it on your mood board or vision board, we're in the thick of it. And this is where we lean on our partners, those that show up, those that come to you, not as a platform. I work with Hubspot. As a matter of fact, I'm in the thick of putting an event together for 4 days tomorrow for, I think it's 5,000 CIOs, which is, by the way, an interesting audience to be in front of. And I lean hard on not the platform itself. I lean hard on the team. And this is why I appreciate Hublot. I appreciate like teams like that. And I think that is a very big mind shift for a lot of event planners right now.
Can you give a little bit, go back a little bit?
Sure.
And I've always had this issue, especially with new people that come in the business. What is the difference? What is strategy? How do you explain why strategy is so important, and what really is it? And how do you know when it's not, when the person's presenting you something that's not strategy?
Right.
What advice would you give to the managers that say, here's my strategy, but it's not really?
So the first red flag, let's talk about code red for a second.
Code red. Okay.
Code, right?
Dahlia, code red.
So code red is when someone says, I have an event strategy, and they actually pulled up their plan from 2019 on a very beautiful Google Doc with a lot of tabs. It's color coded because they understand the color codes. Nobody else on their flippin' team understands the color codes. And it is just a cookie cutter. This is my face-to-face, or better yet, which I've had clients do, where they send me a run-off show of a potential digital event. And they're like, this is our plan. And I'm like, this says bring coffee out to the hallway at 2:05. That is not your digital virtual plan. So when the code reds is when someone says, I have a strategy, but basically what they haven't done was, first and foremost, be realistic in the sense of like relevant at the time we are in. Second is when not everybody in different departments are working together, and those silos are real, especially on the digital side. And then all of a sudden they present a plan. Nobody knows what's going on, but they put everybody in the kitchen and as many chefs in the kitchen as they can.
With no central strategy.
With no central strategy, and with no way of being able to communicate what the goals are of the stakeholders. So it's come to a point where we produce virtual shows, and I'm asking, okay, so you need a proposal back. What is your event like? Oh, I don't know, sometime in October. So how many people? We're looking at 5,000. We might end up with 600. Oh, we don't know what the program is going to look like, but we do want some magician involved. Honestly, and it's like when it comes to exhibitors, different strategy. So it's there's no clear thinking right now. And actually my last LinkedIn post, which I guess generated a lot of conversation, where I'm like, I am sensing last year was hamster wheel. This year we're in panic mode. There is a huge panic right now because there is no plan. There is no backup plan.
Let's go back. Cathy, you are a senior executive at many companies. When you think strategy, what do you think? Because strategy drives everything else.
Yeah,
Getting to strategy is not simple, but the strategy should be simple, right?
The strategy should be simple, but I think, and I'd love to hear what everyone's experiences are right now, Sara in particular, and I think Robert as probably a ripple effect of what all of your clients are going through, but we were starting to walk toward the light. We're seeing the end of this dark, awful tunnel, and now Delta. And so I think what's so interesting is what Dahlia just touched on feels a lot like what the industry has just been going through. Like they might have had a strategy, and they might have even had a Q4 event strategy that they were locked into. They're like, hey, I lost a lot of revenue and a lot of lead or a lot of pipe because we didn't have the event plan that we had or that we had originally planned for. And so maybe they started dabbling in hybrid or little bitsy regional in-person events, but stuck toward virtual, but they didn't really lean into redefining how they're going to engage over virtual because they're like, oh, we're going to get back to in-person, so we're good. And so I think a lot of people are having to rethink their strategy. I think what used to be an obvious cookie cutter 80-20 model with 80% in-person, 20% like webinar formatted, everyone has to throw all that shit away and start from scratch and redefine what event strategy means for them this year, what it's going to mean next year. I don't even know. I had an event strategy for Q4 that I'm throwing away right now. So I'd love to hear what you guys are experiencing.
Well, I think if I could pipe in, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think to understand your strategy, you have to understand your demographics. And that's the key into what you're trying to deliver and who are your demographics. Because your demographics really do drive your strategy. And the first question out of my mouth is, what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to get across? How are you trying to present yourself? Who are your demographics? Because with that knowledge, I can then recommend and take my production and everything else, and then engagement tools and recommend engagement tools how like really far down the pipe if I have the answers to those questions. And you're right that the strategy has been completely, I think, because people didn't know the end questions to those, the answers to those questions. I don't think they knew what they were trying to achieve virtually. I didn't think, so many clients don't know their demographics. Like, it's crazy. Okay, you got, as you just said, Dahlia, you have 5,000 people signing on. Who are they? Are they older? Are they younger? What generation do they come from? Are they tech savvy? Are they not tech savvy? Because that's all really important on how you deliver everything.
So have you been able to adjust your intake program in order to get to those answers? And then, somebody says, I want this, but you're going to tell them maybe you don't.
Yes. So as everyone in this panel knows, that hybrid quotes, clients are calling saying, I want a hybrid quote. They don't understand what a hybrid is in most cases. And I know I do a lot of an association work. I know Sara does a lot more in the corporate side, but in the association world, I know you can't afford a fully hybrid event. So now we got to figure out what you're trying to achieve and make sure that we can hit those nails on the head, right?
One of the things in our pre-call, we talked about what do you do after the heart attack? What's the first thing you do when the person looks at the bill and says, holy crap?
What's interesting, I think that we're in that period right now. We're in the hospital bed right after the heart attack. And I think going back to what Robert was touching on in that understanding the demographic, we also need to understand the psychographic and the sort of fears that people have and the comfort with hybrid. I think if anything, this forcing us in the hospital bed, forcing us to rethink what we should be doing for our audience is a really good opportunity. Okay, let's take a pause. Let's rethink this. What areas are okay and want to have little small watch parties, right? And feel comfortable doing so. And who wants in person? Who wants what type of virtual? This is our chance to reset. And I'm sure, like Sara from the corporate end, this is where most of my experience is. I don't know if you're experiencing the same, but there is a tendency to want to cookie cutter what the perfect event strategy that you have developed over years and years. You've probably tested, optimized, and you're like, yes, I've got this great strategy. Like, how are you guys dealing with this?
Yeah, I think as you guys were talking about strategy, one of the things previously I would always just look at, like everyone was saying, what are our end goals? How do I want our attendees to feel when they leave this experience? And then work backwards from there. But because of everything that's going on, and now with the emergence of Delta, it's even making me personally take a step back even further and say, oh, how are cultures going to change? How is our society going to change because of this? Because let's say we're in this for another year, possibly even another 4 years, 5 years, right? If this keeps to go on, how are everyone I know, all of our clients, just people in their own lives, how are they going to view the world differently? Because that's going to influence all of our events, no matter what our goals. Are people going to feel comfortable being indoors for the next 5 years on top of one another, even if they're just a little bit spaced apart? Or are we going to have to really rethink our framing to say, maybe we're going to have to do some localized events, city roadshows for the next couple of years, all outdoors, because that's what people's comfort level is going to be. And then offer a virtual option on top of that for anyone that doesn't want to travel. So what I'm trying to do is really just try and read as much as I can and get a sense of how are their comfortable levels and their desires going to change? How are their desires to travel going to change? Are people going to cut back on their travel 50% because they realize they don't have to travel as much as they used to? So it's really interesting to me. I feel like our whole world is changing, and that's going to impact events forever.
Do the C-suite people rely on you more because you're so close to both the customers and the product? Because I know I've heard that in other areas, that there's a new level of appreciation of the event organizer because of the contact they have with all the constituencies.
Yeah, I've been really lucky with Rakuten. They are huge event champions, and I've worked closely with the C-suite pretty much since I've been at the company for over a decade. So they care about events, they know how powerful they are, and I talk with them every week. So
do you know why they think that? They know how powerful it is, and what is the proof that they came in? Because they don't teach this in Harvard Business School about events.
Yeah,
the last thing they teach.
One thing that I tried to focus on a lot throughout my career is on ROI for events, which is like this when it comes to events, it's like, how do you prove ROI for an event? It's like this abstract concept in some ways, but depending on the company you work for, I think that there's ways that you can develop equations to throw data at events, not just ticket revenue, how many people are in a room, but looking at how your clients reacted, revenue that came in as a result of the event, and actually apply equations to it. And so I think that's how you get the C-suite really interested, is saying, here, let me show you exactly how this event impacted the business.
Do you have examples?
I was going to say, yeah, I could provide an example, but because I worked with Sara at Rakuten, and what was really brilliant about Sara and her team in not only setting expectations for the executive team, but then reporting upon the ROI, is that she didn't go into an event saying, this is always going to be how we measure ROI. She actually redefined what success meant for each unique event. Thus, as we were talking about before, like there should be a unique strategy and then unique plans and tactics for every event. But for every event that Sara and her team would run, they would very much say, this is how we're measuring success. This is how we will measure ROI. And so that was what was wonderful, is that the executives couldn't go into each event being like, how come the cost per lead is higher this time? Because she set an expectation that like this event is going to be measured by X or Y, just on our toes.
That is a brilliant move, by the way.
1000%.
I've been in many corporate meetings where they'll come back and said about the old metric, but that is really good. But how important also is merchandising the events back to the C-suite to let them know, because they'll just forget one event after the next. I would assume that's part of what you do too.
It's so interesting you bring that up, because that was something that I was going to talk about next. Is I feel like events, when people are there and they experience it in person, just like anything, when they first walk away, people are super excited. Even when someone goes to a wedding, right? Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. It was so wonderful. I had so much fun. There's all this excitement. But then as time goes by, it's like a cloud of smoke that slowly just disappears, and people forget, oh, wait, was it that great? Or what exactly happened? And it gets mixed in with all the other events that people attend. So capturing that, even for years to come, honestly, because for event planners, you start to compare year over year. Annual events, they're happening all the time. And so when you have that data to go back and say, look at how successful this was, and we can build upon it, I think that's really important. This is like very corporate, putting a deck together and saving it for all eternity with and everything, and try and almost recreate the experience when people look back on it a year later.
Cathy, does Hubelo provide the ammunition for a planner to merchandise it back to the C-suite? Because this is the key thing. Tell us a little bit about that.
In fact, so with virtual, that's a great benefit of virtual, right? Is that you come out with exponentially more data. I think the harder part is, what do you do with that data? How do you action it based upon, what campaigns you want to build after the event? And that's where our team especially becomes really helpful. But then also, like, how do you take those key learnings and continue to optimize? And again, a really great benefit of virtual is that we can have these events every 2 weeks if we want to. I could take learnings from my event last month and put them into play this month, because all of that data, seeing who's engaging with what segments dropped off more than others, taking a look at all of the most engaged versus least engaged, those that downloaded the content. You just get so much more rich data. And so it makes it easier to report upon, for sure. But I would say what changes exponentially is the ability to look at different audience segments and really truly perfect that your science of engaging with audiences. And I imagine what Sara just raised with regards to, we did this last year, how do we do that again and then make it better and make it better year after year? Our insights obviously help, but I imagine, Dahlia, that you don't probably have much of that, oh, I need to continue to like get better. You're probably just completely wiping the whiteboard clear and starting from scratch each time. Or
it depends on how open the client is and not stuck in their ways. So we have a big dilemma where, especially on the association side, if it's not broken, you're not going to fix it. And the conversations are bigger than just events. The conversations are, your business model is broken. Your membership dues that you like survived on and your one annual conference, not anymore. So Sara is lucky. Sara's lucky because she's got the C-suite that listens to her. What I see that is happening more so now and is there's going to be a brain drain when it comes to event professionals and that talent and experience that we need within organizations that are taking care of experiences. And the reason of it is because the C-suite is not listening to them, is riding them hard, is putting too much on their plate. As an example, true example, when they are supposed to be going back face to face, dealing with venues and suppliers, they have no freaking clue if customer service is going to be there, F&B, is the coffee going to still be shitty or not thing. And they put another layer of, go ahead and put a full-on digital event on top of that with your team of 1.5 people. And so this is where, and like what Robert was saying, we're learning here on the job. We're teaching on the job. The therapy part is not like fun. It's like real. These people are breaking down. They're not getting hit by COVID. They're getting hit by mental fatigue and making themselves physically sick to a point they'll just walk away. We were number 5 on the most stressful job list. Okay, I think we're like number 1 at the moment. But this is telling because there's another dynamic that is happening. The dynamic is, oh, we're going back to normal. Bring me back that 5 million that I used to do on a show floor virtually. And you're like, as an event planner, I've got clients that go back to them and say, how the freak do you want me to do that? Because the kicker is they don't know what they don't know. They probably logged on a virtual event of some kind and they're like, oh, look at the bells and whistles, look at whatever. They don't understand what goes on behind the thing. How many events has everybody been on where like sponsors and exhibitors, you ask them for creative assets so that their like booths don't look empty? And it's crazy. It's like details like that. But what I'm trying to get at is, Sara, you're lucky. But the whole idea of trying to educate the C-suite and telling them, yes, we deserve a place around the table and the strategy is real, but it is a bigger conversation to a point where some event planners are not comfortable with it. They're not comfortable.
Oh, a lot of them are not.
Oh, yeah.
I hear Robert yelling, go Dahlia, because he's basically thinking exactly what you're thinking with his clients. In our conversations previously, he went through some of the same things. Mm-hmm. And he had some methods of convincing people in a nice way that they have to change their whole
He's
way.
He's nicer than me. I have no filter. So.
Well, I'm Canadian, so
they're nicer than all of us.
That is
Americans.
Another plus. I am not. I am pure Egyptian, hot-blooded, and in-your-face type of person. So there you go.
And we love you for it.
Yes, we do. I'm hot-blooded, but you wouldn't know it.
But so there's a discomfort, and I love and I cherish everybody that's putting out content and trying to tell other event profs with checklists of how to do hybrid and all of that. What they need to understand is, first, you're not in this alone. Second is, when you take a seat at the table, this is exactly, you should be co-creating business conversations, meaning with your tech providers or partners, with your keep it outside of the bubble that has been in place for a long time. When it comes to business models, when it comes to missed revenue opportunities, I'm not talking about what you charge a sponsor page or booth and what assets they get. The most important conversations is around content, is around the terminology we're using. This is why Sara did the shift. You did pirouettes. I'm not using the other P word. You did pirouettes and you took the experience design that you had and you're doing something different, but it's kicking ass and it's working. So like when you think of it, this is where you think of what we do best, creative design,
right,
content design. And if it's not in our wheelhouse, you got to go get that talent or else you will die.
I would like to shift the conversation a little bit now to tactical, so that when people listen to this, there are things that they can actually use tomorrow in terms of how to get people to come to their events, what lines in the email work to get people to have to take action. And so I first wanted to start with Robert, who had some ideas on how you actually bring people to events. Like, how do you signal things that are working? Like, we had some really great conversations about this previously.
Yeah, I think Dahlia sort of hit the nail on the head with the content is, of course, so important. And number one. Number two would be engagement. How do you get people engaged into that content? How do you get them to be part of that virtual event? And different platforms offer different things. Hubspot has these great lounge tables, which I love. And this is a great way for people to have one-on-one, one with 3 other people or a table of 8, to have those conversations to get people engaged. But it's not as easy as saying, go into those lounge tables, we're having a break. You have to be so creative to get people to go into those lounge tables. You have to get creative to get people to excited into coming to the event. And so one of the biggest things is, we talked about, David, about recordings and a live event. And my theory is always, if you're asking people to show up live for your event, they don't want to watch a recording of your event. They want to see a live event, right? And they want the nuances of the cat jumping on your lap or your kid running across in his diapers. They want those nuances because that makes it real for them. And it draws them in, it drags them into that experience of a live experience. I understand that there are times to record, so don't get me wrong with that. There are times when you want to do maybe your sponsorship 30-second or minute recording, or you want to do, someone's having technical issues, you want to record it. Get it. I get that. But generally, you should, if you're inviting your audience, and this is what people are always asking me, it's the $1 million question. No, make at least 70% of it live because people expect that.
You talked about signaling too. What was signaling about?
So what do you mean by that?
Signaling, you're doing things in your event to allow people to experience things that you didn't necessarily, they're not expected. It's the surprise.
The obvious ones in virtual is your polling and your Q&A, and doing your Q&A live, doing it on the fly is a great way to get people involved, making sure that your speakers comment on the Q&A, comment on the polls, comment on those chats that are going live while people are talking, all available in the platforms that we're talking about. But you can draw people in by using different ways, like doing smaller social circles, getting people to talk in small rooms with your sponsors. That is really important and key. And Dahlia had brought up this whole thing as sponsors. Sponsors no longer is just showing up at a booth and looking at people and watching them and waiting for people to come to you. You never really could do that live anyhow, but why do you think you can do it virtually? As a sponsor, we do these training sessions before the event, and we say to the sponsors, you can't just sit in your booth. You got to get out there and you got to chat. So when I sponsor and I'm sponsoring, I'm always saying, hey, there's Sara. Hi, Sara. How are you doing? How are you doing today? I'm sending a little text or can you chat with me? Can we set up a meeting time? Can we do this? Can we do that? You have to get out and you have to get people involved and engaged. Yeah. And if you're just sitting in your booth, you're going to hate the experience. And I've had clients say that to me.
It's so interesting. Going back to data and analytics in our own events, we saw that some booths got a lot of traffic. And I think it was organic to what was going on at that exact time. We were having a 3D stage. And so they went to those booths that were powering those kinds of 3D, bringing the world on one stage together type of experiences. And then others didn't. And I think that when I looked at the data of our event, I realized like I actually have to integrate in these sponsors into our content a little bit more, because you're right, there is no free iPad or whatever the sexy fireworks stuff is that's going to drive you toward the booths. It's like after the event, it would be too easy for people to just drop off if you don't give them really compelling reasons to want to go and engage. And I think it brings a new challenge in virtual to think through, like, how do you really entice? Because there's on the fly, and then there's also the very well planned out, choreographed, like driving attention to these things. And part of that, I think, is the social contract with virtual and with in-person to really break out what these experiences are going to be like and how you as an attendee will get to experience these, because people don't know, like they don't know what in-person is going to, how safe is it going to be? What does one-on-one meetings, what does food and beverage mean in an in-person event of 10 people right now? Right? I don't know. And I don't know if I want to go. And for virtual, I don't know, is it going to be me sitting there for 3 hours listening? And I think part of that's the challenge for all of us now is like, how do you get people not only to want to go, but to understand like what the experience is going to be like for them? So they're almost prepared for that psychologically. Have you guys thought about that?
Sarah?
Yeah. Sorry,
I was just going to say, well, I was going to circle back to what Dahlia was saying about content and how that's so key now. And I'm on the same page. And one of the mantras I continually say to myself is content is king again. We're back there. And the sessions for me and events for me that have piqued my personal interest is unique conversations that I don't think I ever could have seen in person. And I feel like that's a great way to think about content, is what is something that you can deliver to people that they would have so rarely seen in person, like a panel discussion with 3 or 4 experts on a topic that usually would never be able to be in a room together due to their schedules or competing interests, but they're willing to have a conversation from their office and their home, combining people that are almost related to a field, but not so much, like having a semi-well-known podcaster talking to a marketer and maybe a scientist, people that are different worlds, but you can have them crash together in a virtual offering. And I think that's a really great way to hook people in.
What is it though about that? Is it that's the unexpected comes out of that? It's like a new idea that they're actually formulating in real time almost. And connected to your thinking. And
yeah,
says,
like Robert was saying. Yeah, like Robert was saying, it's live too. So you just, how is it going to play out? It's like you're watching as a fly in the room from your home and seeing how is this conversation going to go, and it's live. So there's an element of excitement to that. And if it's pre-recorded, like Robert was saying, I think people are like, well, I could just watch this on YouTube. So why would I join?
Well, as long as it's intimate in some way. I believe that our whole business is about how do you scale intimacy. And that's why these small groups, like every time I'm in a Zoom thing and they break out into the small groups and I get to know the 6 people in the room, I feel satisfied that I have like actually met somebody that I would want to talk to again, perhaps. And then if you do it again and they switch the people, it's even better. And also I found that you have to be an active participant. We have to train people to actually take advantage of attending these events. Dahlia, you have your hand up and you're about to speak.
So a couple of things. The onboarding and the training is critical at this point, to a point. So we have been critical of the content that we're seeing. Like, we're connoisseurs. All of a sudden, the whole globe has become connoisseurs on Zoom, or on content presentation delivery, and they can rate a speaker in 1 nanosecond, which is true. To Robert's point, this is why pre-records are going to be in trouble soon. And then what's going to happen is, like, when you go to an event planner and say, we got to go live, then they're going to get sticker shock and they're saying, oh my God, and this is going to cost me my firstborn. Yes, it's going to cost you your firstborn. But what they don't understand is that content that you are capturing, the content that you are planning out. And to Sarah's point, those panel discussions, those conversations become part of offering that has monetization to it. but they can't think through. They think through of check-in and check-out date of an event. But you can take that content and those conversations and those networking opportunities and record what the discussions are around the table. It's almost like Jada Pinkett Smith and her Red Table. Have you guys seen that series?
Red Table Talk, so
Kicks
good.
Ass, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
and so like you think of, that's the creativity part of it. The surprise and delight, I'm all for it. Like when I did the keynote for Hubelo, I actually brought in my daughter as a cameo, because when she unboxed Hubelo's box that was sent to me, she did a video on her own and it went viral on LinkedIn. So there you go. For a 14-year-old, that speaks volumes. But then everybody was like asking about her. So I brought her on. So did Gary Vee bought Zan, right?
Yeah, I think that one was an accident.
So when you think of, your sponsors, they need to be content creators. When I go in as a speaker, and Adler, you do this really, is you feed off and you thrive the presentation on the chat. It's not about only polls and Q&As anymore. You're co-creating the content, and that's going to be the ask going forward. Meaning, event planners, you're going to kill me or mug me for saying this. You have to be more agile now when creating sessions. This goes back to like South by Southwest panel picker, where you go in and you say, oh my God, I want to hear Cathy and Robert and Sara and Adler on a presentation, and this is what I want to ask them. And they've already started creating the session with you. You already have their buy-in. So you got to do that with all stakeholders, exhibitors, sponsors. The labels have to go away. Exhibitors don't make sense in a virtual world, in my opinion.
Right.
So think of them as thought leaders. Think of them as insight showcase, whatever it is you want to like, give it a sexy name. They become part of the content, and then people will continue to want to have more of those.
Let me get a little controversial on this. Everyone's saying content is king.
Oh no, I say content is your new currency.
Okay, whatever it is. But I am going back to the idea of contact is king.
Okay.
And so you need both. You can have all the content you want, but you can get it almost anywhere. But I cannot be in a room or in a chat unless I'm in a room and a chat with Dahlia. So getting to that content, what a lot of the platforms are doing, they started with matchmaking because that's what people wanted. So it's the combination of the content and the contact.
I totally agree with you. I agree. It's the connections, it's the contact, if you will, but it comes down to the content exchange between Adler and Dahlia.
Well, I now judge an event not by how many people attend, but how many conversations are curated. And
which is a new KPI, by the way.
It should be, no. And the idea of the social physics of how events work, because ideas transfer at events. Yep. And we have to set the table and the social physics for how ideas can flow at events. And
totally. This is why the ideas that you get from a chat room versus Q&A and polling, and you curate that becomes content. That's gold for you.
Well, and for Sara, it turns into buying. Yeah. Oh my God, I need to have that. And I need to understand that. I need to join that. I always say that the most powerful word in the English language is the word let's. Because anytime people get together, they say, let's go to lunch, let's go to dinner, let's start a revolution, let's buy that. And we all want to get to the let's. And that's my philosophy of how the purpose of events and things like that. And I think that the new platforms are enabling that. But the event organizers need to be the artists that know how to use the canvas properly.
I think you guys just came up with a new industry formula, which is content plus contact equals connection.
Yes.
Right.
So there's another C, by the way, that I'd like to add on.
Community.
Which is
coaching. Okay.
Because if you empower and coach each other, that's where your community, that word, really lives. You can belong to a community because you're being celebrated, or you're being empowered, or you're being valued.
You know, I usually end these things by asking you to give us your sense of the world, but I want to end it by what have you learned today, and how do you, because that's the idea. Like, what have we picked up and what have we learned from this conversation to change our strategies or our thinking? So I don't know. Do you want to start, Robert? Do you want to go with sort of a wrap up? We've gone way longer than we thought we were going to go because this is so interesting.
Well, I think we could go another couple hours personally, but it's such a great conversation. I really do believe that what we did last year to survive and what we did at the beginning of this year to get through is all changed. Now we have to take it to the next level because people are expecting that, and people, your attendees, no matter the demographic, are going to they want more. And everything that you just talked about, I love the active participants. I think that's so true. It's active participants, it's active sponsors, it's active thought leaders, which I love that term. And it's just being active when you're in a virtual meeting, like you would if you were in a live meeting. You would go and talk to the person beside you. You would go in the reception areas. You would talk to them while you're picking up your coffee and your donut. So I think it's really important that we're all active there. But I think there's the value here, and is this: you got to be creative going forward. You've got to take it to the next level, and you can't rely on what you've been doing, and trust in your partners and trust in your community to help you through it.
That's great. That's fantastic. Sara, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, I think this all just solidifies the importance that I place on connection for people. It's really hard throughout the pandemic to want to connect with people sometimes online. You're in your home a lot. It can be really isolating. I've experienced this, but then joining events where they have the one-to-one connection, or I had joined one where it was like a roulette where you had a 2-minute conversation with the person, they passed you on to the next one. And I came out of that with so much joy and feeling so connected. And so what this has really taught me, this experience, is as an event planner, we're now in this really unique position where we can say, what are my experiences and how am I feeling? And then use that as your strategy. Because previously, before COVID, I so rarely was an attendee at an event. I really tried to figure out what that attendee experience was, but I didn't, because I was always running them. And then every once in a while, I'd go to a conference and I'd be like, oh, this is what it's like. I should put this into my events. And now one of the really unique opportunities we have is that we're living this every day, and we know what our clients, our target audience, what their life is like. And so we can use that idea of what do I want to see and put that right into our strategy.
So I'm super excited because I see 2 suppliers on this podcast, right? And there's this co-creating type of energy and forward thinking, which is fantastic. And I want event profs to do more of that. Even supplier with supplier, the affiliation, the partnership, the mind sharing, and the idea flowing. And there should be more of this. I also urge and challenge and play devil's advocate, but challenge more so than anything, that we need to do a better job in exploiting chaos in our industry. It's the only way we are going to shift everything. It's the only way that we are going to grab someone's attention and someone's loyalty, not naming it an event, not naming it whatever, hybrid, blended, whatever, but that it is something that if Adler comes and says, I need you in a room with Cathy, Sara, and Robert, I'm like right there all the time. That's what we need to create going forward. And I want people to get out of this mindset of it's one event after another. It is a continuum of just connections, like you said, and awesome content and awesome conversations. And let's repeat. We'll find out how to make money later. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But yes, we would.
No, but I think you hit the nail on the head in that the only way that we are all going to catapult out of this and get to that dream state is if we've got more conversations where we're bringing experts from every perspective, right? From corporate, from EMC, from production, from the customer and the event organization perspective. But everyone's coming into it with a different point of view, with different learnings, because Lord knows our business model, as I think you've all mentioned in one way or another, is shifting. We can't lean on the old, here's what I'll do with $1 million, here's what I'll do with $50 million. It's more like, what do I need to do for the business? What is the safest, the most successful, the most creative way we could go about this? How do I rethink the staffing of my teams? Because it's fascinating. I've actually spoken to, I think, 3 event marketers recently who recently got merged with digital marketing teams. This is more so relevant to the corporate end, because events are no longer totally analog. They're a lot more digital, and they want digital teams to all work together. So I think it's, what is the makeup of all of the resources that I need? And we're just in a completely reshaping right now of what's the business model? How do I drive new ROI models out of these new frameworks? It's so interesting. And I'm learning every day from more and more conversations like this.
Yeah, I totally have. This conversation has been particularly interesting to me because when I think Dahlia said the co-creation piece, that what we're doing, we're at the brick phone age of this business where we're right now. We're basically so far down in the AOL dial-up era that we haven't yet begun to thrive. I believe that these new platforms that are being created are the greatest co-creation vehicles invented, because we're going to be able to do brainstormers with the world. We're going to be able to do things now by co-creating things together as opposed to just information. It's going to be another use case. And a corporation is going to want to put an idea out there and get everybody's opinion before they do it. And associations are going to want to do the same thing. So the whole purpose of a meeting is going to be co-creation as opposed to just information vomiting. You know what I mean? Which I don't think is what we should be doing anymore. Because people feel more inspired when they're part of creating the dream. And we want everyone to be, and everyone is capable of helping to create the dream. And so I think that we're enabling this technology that's going to change the world. And that we as event organizers are just at the nascent part of this, and that all of the tactics, audio, visual, everything that's going to enhance it is going to inspire us to do more with this type of format, to create new solutions for everything from climate change to a new product on a website, or a new way of doing things, or a new way to have workflow. So you'll get on these things, and it's the collective intelligence of the world that people think is going to be what saves us, and it's not our individual thinking. So with that said, I am pumped, and I wish we can go on forever and turn this into a complete, let's go to camp together. And I do think the one last thing I want to say is what Sara said. It's about, event organizing is now more about managing feelings than it is about anything else. It also comes down to Maya Angelou. And people, you want to get people feeling in a way that they're inspired to take action. And having a good content and good connections makes it important too. So with all that said, I am ready to, let's go, charge the mountaintop. Thank you all, guys. Thank you guys for participating in this great co-creation of the future.
Thank you. This was amazing.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the Gather Geeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of Gather Geeks. Until then, gather on.